Recording in progress.
So, dear respected teachers, dear family, dear friends, I looked around while all of you had your eyes closed. I kept mine open, and I looked around, and suddenly I felt teary. Just seeing how beautiful all of you are. And then that actually affirms that I'm beautiful too. So I saw all that beauty out there, and I knew that I was feeling beautiful inside. So that's very touching, I think. You know, it brings up some emotion in me. So, you know, we like to give a title to a talk. But what I noticed about our teacher, Ty, was no matter what topic whatever the title, he always sort of talked about what he wanted to talk about, just whatever came up. I'm sure he also had a plan, especially when he was talking from making the connection between the practice and science, for example. And so then he would often, just as the monastic Dharma teachers do today, they very often will use a whiteboard. And so I'm sure that when he spoke, you know, directly about sutras, and can you hear me all right? I think I just lost my own self there for a moment. Oh, yeah. I don't do that. And but I do, you know, I try to stay with the topic. But actually the topic always sort of comes around to being present, right? Being in the moment, being in touch with our breath and body. And just as Sister Renee, that beautiful guided meditation reminded us and prompted us to realize that and to come back. So I gave the title on being a true person. And so what does that mean? And so when I was sitting over there, the chair to the side, listening to the guidance and watching my thoughts and whatever was coming up, I had a memory come up that has something to do with the topic. And I was 29 years old. It was 1970. And I was walking alone without any companions with me on the Hauptstrasse, the main street of Heidelberg, Germany. At that time, it was West Germany. So this was before the wall came down, quite a bit before the wall came down. And my husband and our young family my husband and our young family had just moved to Germany. And so something is happening with audio. So this might not have been the first day that I was walking down that street without companions, without my husband or friend or one of my children. But this is the one that I remember when I had the feeling of, it was also new and different. No one was speaking English. No one was speaking English in Heidelberg in 1970. And I was speaking no German, although that I quickly began to study German. Very difficult to not be able to even say hello or how are you or how much is that or what is your name or my name is, or to try to make that personal connection. So I did begin to apply myself. But at this point, it was very early. We had just arrived not long before. And I had this feeling of like, I'm a new person. I can just be anybody here. I don't know that I'm going to be able to express it exactly. I just had the feeling and the memory come up. But I just realized that no one around me knew anything about my history. They had no expectation of me. Maybe they would have had some when they realized I was an American. This was the American sector of Germany and West Germany. So perhaps expectations would have kicked in for some of them, of course, then, whatever the little bit they might have known or thought they knew about an American woman. But I felt absolutely free. I think that's it. I felt free. I felt free of all the perceptions, all the roles. Of course, I was still a wife and a mother. And of course, I was still a daughter and a sister and an aunt, an auntie. But in that moment, I felt absolutely free because none of those people were with me in that moment. And I was just free of all that. And I could be me. And I realized that I could be me. But who was me? And I'm sure, and I don't know. I don't know how far I went with that thinking, who am I really? I don't remember. I'm sure that what I was seeing and experiencing on the street was too interesting for me to get too caught up in that story, in that question. But I know that I began to question myself in those years. In those years, I began to question myself. Like, who am I and what is it that I really do believe? And my husband was medical corps in the Army, the U.S. Army. He had to go in those years. Those were the years of the Vietnam American War. They really wanted doctors. And my husband really didn't want to go to Vietnam. He was not a surgeon, and he was not an infectious disease person. And he couldn't see that there would be any value in him as a doctor there. Plus, he just didn't want to go. He didn't want to be in all that violence. So that's how we ended up in Germany. And those were the years also right after the civil rights movement in the US and desegregation. We were from the South, Southern US, very conservative. We both came from the same small town in South Carolina, where the vast majority of the enslaved people who were brought to America entered America or the US about 20 minutes from where I grew up. where I was born and grew up. So I think I have to just keep this mic right at my mouth. I'm going to try to do my best. So I'll prop myself up here. So those were the years. So 1970. So those years of awakening for many people, including us, to the realities, the fog, the stories we'd been told and tried to believe. And I remember the U.S. Army required at least all the officers, I don't know if every person, but all the officers had to go through training to, I don't really remember what it was called, but it was to help you to realize just how racist you were, whether you knew it or not. And I can remember my husband would come home and say, you know, I wish you could go through this because it's really pretty. He was learning so much about himself and just the beliefs that we had never questioned. Just as there are so many beliefs about so virtually everything that all of us are questioning as we go through life, or maybe not questioning. But I'm sure that those of you who are in this room and online, you're here because you are questioning, you are wondering, you are discovering, and you realize that you are on a path of self-discovery and that that's what life is. But for so many of us, and certainly for me, I had those moments like I had in 1970 and throughout, I've had moments. But then the vast majority of the time, just caught up in my daily life and falling back into into being on autopilot. Mm-hmm. Just doing what my mother had done, saying the things that people around me had said. So that I don't know, but I can only imagine that not much of what I said was actually original coming from me. You know, it was someone else's belief, someone else's opinion, and then maybe it sparked something in me, or I thought, yes, oh, that's true. Yeah, okay, I can go along with that. So I think I went along with a lot, and maybe you find that to be true in your life too. You know, and as we begin this waking up to that this is my life, it's your life, I'm living this life. And yes, it's true, we learn, we're the continuation of our ancestors, but we're in the present moment. They had their present moment, and they're still here. But now it's up to us to be in this present moment with what we're all learning and how we're all evolving, and we're learning and teaching each other. Actually, I felt myself disagree just a bit, and I knew that Brother Ivan was being quite humble when he said he was practicing humility when he said there are no teachers here. But actually, every one of us is a teacher. We're always learning from each other. That's the value of sitting in a circle. That's the value of paying attention to what's around you. For me to pay attention, you know, and to listen to you. So when we have the Q&A, that's your chance to give a Dharma talk. It might be in the form of a question, but it's still a Dharma talk. It's your Dharma coming out, and you're expressing that, and you will be teaching all of us by asking the question or making the statement of whatever is coming alive in you in the moment. So to have come to a place in our lives where we realize that actually I'm not the person I was, and you aren't either. You know, to have come to a place where we begin to notice that flowers bloom and then flowers wilt, but then they come back. And so we begin to see, don't we love our teacher? Don't we love our teacher? All of them. But Ty in particular, how he used nature to help us to see the reality of what it is to be a human being as well, another form of life on this planet. And how he uses the words, we're flowers in the garden of humanity. How poetic is that? And memorable. We remember it because it's not common language. So we begin to wake up to the fact that we're not some static, fixed entity. And yet that's what we often believe, is that I'm a finished product. We don't necessarily maybe have that thought, but the feeling is there that, and especially when we look at our siblings, the people around us, our spouses, our partners, and we think, I know this person. I've lived with this person for 20 years. I know my sister. She was like that. She is like that. And she will always be like that. Don't we often have that feeling and belief? True belief. And the truth is, what I've realized about myself over the years is sometimes we want it like that. And we actually don't allow the people in our lives to change. Not in our own minds, anyway. They could be changing for other people. Somebody else maybe is allowing it because they aren't so invested in it, in the relationship. It's not as intimate a relationship. But don't we all kind of want some kind of stability? We'd like to hold on to things. Let's just can things just calm down and remain the same for a little while? All this change is just so confusing, and I'm always having to adapt to something new. Wouldn't it be nice? I mean, isn't that why we don't, or at least I don't, when I think of the natural calamities, I think earthquake might be one of the worst, because if you cannot even find stable ground to stand on, how frightening is that? But that's kind of a metaphor, really, how I see it as a metaphor for how we are. But we want, if we're not awake to it, if we haven't become aware yet, that we want to hold on to things and have it stay the same. And then, okay, I know what that's like. I don't have to think about that. I don't have to pay attention to that, really, including my partner. Oh yeah, good morning, darling. Yeah, okay. I know what, no surprises there. Nothing interesting. Been with him 20 years. I remember hearing Ty in a Dharma talk in Vermont, a week-long retreat in Vermont in about 1999. And I cried when I heard this. He said, so I was married and very much stuck. We were both stuck in, you are that way. He is that way. She is never going. And so when he said, to think that that person, your partner, sitting next to you is a supreme form of arrogance. Those were his words. And he might have also used, in the next sentences or so, he might have talked about ignorance. Not the intellectual kind of ignorance, not the brain power, but the emotional ignorance, or where we are in any particular stage of our life where we have not realized something yet. I mean, everything is here. We have all the conditions to know and understand everything. But for that to unfold maybe takes countless lives, countless eons of lives for that to unfold. So to be in denial about something, we often judge the people around us, don't we? Oh, why is she the way she is? Why? And then why doesn't she just come with me on Sunday? I tried to tell her, and I gave her a book to read. But then to remember that when I remember, I wasn't always interested in being here on Sunday. There were all those years that I was not awake to anything, an occasional glimmer of something, of who I was and what life might be. But then back into, as I mentioned earlier, back into the daily life. So life is so full of distractions, even more so now, I would say, even more so. Life is complex, wouldn't you agree? Yeah. We're not living on the farm anymore without the telephone of any kind, just the sounds of nature and the family around us. Think of that simple life. And now look at the complexity and all that we do have to be with every day and adapt to every day. So no wonder we want something to stay the same. Just something. You just stay the same. Don't change. I want to be able to count on this being this way because everything else seems to be changing. So we can get really caught in a lot of resistance, and we can get caught in a lot of judgment, judging others, and wanting others to be different from the way they are. So there's that other extreme too, because I don't like you the way you are. So I'd like for you to change. And I know you have it in you. I've learned enough to know that, but you don't seem to. You don't seem to be at all interested. And so what's wrong with you anyway? So we sit in judgment, and we might even say, and I can remember when I said these words, you're just in denial about this. Don't you see it? Like a 4-letter word. Denial is not a 4-letter word. It's 5 letters. And it's there to protect us. And this is true of the people around you, your loved ones who didn't want to come with you today, who are still caught in a lot of craziness, for lack of a better word, craziness. Eckhart Tolle, the teacher Eckhart Tolle, he wrote The Power of Now. He's quite an evolved spiritual teacher. German by birth, lives in Canada. And I really like him a lot. And most of the monastics at Plum Village read his books, and they love him too. So during the pandemic, I watched a good number of his little 15-minute YouTube teachings, and he talked about how everybody wanted to get back to normal. And he said, normal? That's just another word for insanity. Insane. So what he was saying is the world is insane. We're trying to go sane. We're trying to get in touch with our sanity. So why would you ever want to go back and have it be the same? So if we truly want to, and I know that we do, if we truly want to evolve, be in touch with that peace that we all have inside, to have a greater capacity to love myself, to be less critical of myself, to let go of the expectations that someone else has put on me, and I adopted them and thought that I needed to do that and be that way. So if we want to allow that to happen, we practice like this. This is one way. I'm sure there are other ways, but you have encountered this. I've encountered this. So this is what's real for us. This is where the opportunity is for us. So I'm looking, every time I look at the wall over there, I see that calligraphy by Ty, The Joyful Path. And it can be that. It can be a joyful path. But very often, it feels anything but joyful, especially the more we practice being in the present moment. And then we become aware more and more at a deeper and deeper level of our own suffering, the suffering that's been there all along, that we just glossed over, or the suffering around us. So then we have to continue. Don't get discouraged. Continue to be in the present moment. Continue to practice with other like-minded people like this for support. We need support. Continue to involve yourself in community, particularly in a spiritual community. It's very difficult to do it by ourselves. In fact, we never do anything by ourselves anyway. So getting back to the topic on being a true person, I found myself thinking about something else too, and it's how, it seems we come into the world with these little, maybe you could call us true emptiness, or maybe it's true joy, this little infant, and we have a path. There's something we're here for some purpose. And I believe the purpose is to learn to love, to learn true love, starting with ourselves, and then being able to feel it for everything, for all forms of life. But somewhere along the way, and I've been around a lot of early childhood teachers, and I've heard many say that it seems that it's around age 3 to 4, that you begin to see the children losing their joy a bit, beginning to change. So what's really happening there? They are getting the message of who they're supposed to be, the role that they're supposed to play in their family. So the family, it might be a blood family, it might be a family of caregivers that you aren't related to by blood, but who are caring for you. They have a certain expectation of you based on the expectations that were put on them, and also based on what's needed in the family. Because the family is a system, right? So we're, as Ty says, we could throw away that pronoun I. There is no I. There's only we. And so here we are now, we're 3 or 4 years old, and it's time now to fit into the family. Maybe we're going to be the savior. Maybe we're going to be the one that makes the family look good. We're going to be extremely intelligent. We're going to be successful in every way that society says is success, how society defines success. Someone may be the one who brings joy. That was my role in my family, born into a family of 4 much older siblings, but 1 baby that had died the year before. A time of life that was quite hard financially. Southern U.S. agricultural area. I was born in 1941. Still recovering from the global depression. Baby dies. Life is hard. And then baby comes again. So what's her job? Bring the joy. I'm very grateful that that was my role. It has worked well for me. I mean, of all the roles that one could have put on one, the expectations, this was a good one. Yeah. So, I got a lot of attention for singing and just for being a cute little toddler. So I got a lot of attention. They used to say, you should have wounds on the back of your neck because we kissed you on the back of your neck so much. We loved the little curls right at the back of your neck. So I got that kind of affirmation early in life. And that kind of approval for being a silly little girl and, yeah. So what was your role? As I got older, there were no expectations other than to get married, have a child, have children, be a wife, and a homemaker, because that's all the people around me had ever seen. And that's all I ever saw. So I got married at 17, right out of high school. Childhood sweetheart. He was already in medical school, older, 5 years older. And I remember my wedding day. I remember waking up on my wedding day. I'm 17 years old. I've just graduated from high school the week before. We have a big wedding that night. And the guests are coming, and the gifts are out there on the table in the dining room with a beautiful cloth on it so that others could come and see the gifts. That was the tradition. Maybe you do some of that. And I remember I woke up and thought, oh, yeah, oh, don't know. Oh, well, too late now. They're all coming. They're all coming. I remember having that feeling. I also remember that the week before, the one and only major problem I'd had at that point with this tooth right here. I had to go and have it a root canal, and I don't know much, but you all could tell me. I'm sure some of you that there is a chart in Chinese medicine that shows you the meridians, all the energy channels, and every tooth has one that leads to something else. And so, of course, once I've gotten to, found a Buddhist practice connected with that, and I've learned the mind is in every cell of the body. And so that was some kind of resistance in the infection. It knew something, there was some suffering that was happening right there. But I also, reflection being a gift that we're able to look back, I never, that day I didn't say, oh no. It was just a fleeting feeling while I was still lying in bed, but nothing else had happened. So I was totally aware and conscious of just that fresh feeling and thought. But then it went away, and I was caught up in the happiness of it all, and the festivities and all of that, and then had years of happiness mixed with unhappiness. But I also had 3 children, and so I've been able to look back at that first marriage. So we lived together 15 years, married 19 years. And realized I went to that for my children, to get my children. Oh my God. And they've been a huge part of my life, because then I became a single mother for 11 years before remarrying. And they've been really my spiritual family. They were just sort of everything. Yeah. So I feel I've talked a good bit. I don't know what time it is. So how much time do we have now for Q&A?
Half an hour.
Okay, I think we should, I can be more specific to what is really going on with you when I can address specific questions. But I do, before I go to that, I want to finish that where I was going with that about we find ourselves, we're in a road. And then it seems that as we come through puberty, at about that time, we begin to look around and we connect what we're really looking for. We don't know it, but this is my experience. What we're really looking for are the conditions that we can, where we will have the power, the ability will be there, what we need, the energy will be there for us to come out of that role and begin to learn, who am I? So what we're really looking for is the energy of mother and father. Because when we are very small and when we're still dependent on mother and father for survival, what can we do but just do what they tell us to do? And what we don't know anything else. But when we begin to separate from them and ready to go out into the world and ready to find a partner, a mate, we're looking for that energy. We're looking, and we find it also in the workplace. And once we become really aware and start investigating and sit and concentrate on what's going on and why is it that I don't feel good around that person? Why is it, and I don't even really know that person, but every time they come up to the water cooler when I'm standing there, I want to back away. What is it about that? And then is it the energy of Aunt Sue, who mistreated me when I was a child? Is it the energy of mother, who never looked at me, and I was wanting her attention? And that might have been the case with some of you, I'm sure. So we begin, it seems then we begin this, even before we know we're doing it, we're already on a path of self-discovery. Who am I? And then, is this really, truly mine? Is this belief my belief? Or is this conditioned mind? Is this the brainwashing that society, that I succumb to, of course? Yeah. So life is an adventure if we stay open to it. If we consciously put ourselves into situations that challenge us. Otherwise, we can just, walk the same path every day from work to home to work and back, and keep it as solid and as stable and unchanging as we can. We can do that. It slows our ability to evolve. So it's very helpful when we put ourselves into challenging situations, like being on the main street in Germany, not having one word of German. Yeah, boy, I could have gotten lost. How would I have found my way home? I didn't have a smartphone. What was I going to do? Yeah. So I'm going to bow out, and I look forward to your questions. Yeah, and your smiles. Trish bowing out. Thank you.
Bowing in. So, dear friends, just come back to your feeling. Come back into awareness with what's being touched inside of you. Perhaps some questions, thoughts, insights. Now we have the chance to ask those questions. They can be as specific or as general, whatever comes up. But the only suggestion is to ask questions from the heart. So not so much about philosophy, theories, things that we can refer to a book afterwards, that kind of thing, but rather from our lived experiences. And to facilitate that, I pasted a link into the online chat for our online friends. We'll ask questions. Now, for everyone in the Sangha house as well, I'd like to share with you this QR code. So there are two ways you can ask questions. Same for the friends online as well. So you can either raise your hand, perhaps the preferred way, allow your voice to be heard. Raise your hand and we'll pass the mic to you and you can ask a question and we'll take them one by one. Similarly, friends online, I'll try and keep a lookout on Zoom for anyone who has raised their hands to try and facilitate that. But if you are a little shy or have something quite personal, but you still like to share the question, then make use of technology of the Mentimeter. So perhaps one of the few times that it's okay to use the phone. Use technology where it's helpful. It's nothing inherently bad about technology or devices, so it's just something to help us. So in this case, can help us communicate. So you can see the information there on how to access the anonymous question board. And so see what arises. And perhaps we can also help ourselves to get into that state of allowing questions to come up. I'll open up the floor for Q&A after we enjoy one sound of the bell. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Terry. I was just thinking about like how difficult it is to sort of like become the true person that you are, because like it seems like there are a lot of ways that you could find the answer, and not all of them kind of seem unreliable. Like you, like for example, like even yourself, like how much do I trust myself, and even others, and like the perceptions and the roles they have, like how much of that is, I mean, not all of it is bad. Some of it is also like is really helpful and useful, but then it seems like there's so much information on. It just seems kind of difficult. So I wonder if you have anything, like any advice on that.
That is a really good question. One way I know a good question is when I'm challenged. But really, I know it's a good question because, yes, I mean, the situation, as you describe it, that we're in as human beings is already challenging enough to try to know, well, how much of that is me and how much of it is you? This belief system, for example. Where did that come from? So all of that is challenging. And now, with so much information and so much of it fake, and it's going to apparently become even more like that with AI. And it has never been more imperative to do your best to stay awake once you begin to wake up, meaning once you begin to feel like I felt that day, like, oh, I could, I'm free, which meant I've let go of, but so once we get a taste of that, someone brings us to something like this, then it becomes more and more necessary. So probably what is going to cause us to gather more in community like this is the very fact that it is becoming more and more challenging. If any of you, I just had an image pop into my mind. If any of you have ever watched any American Western films of cowboys and Indians, pioneers and Indians, Native Americans, and you remember all the films out there that I grew up on them, of the pioneers in their wagons going west, no highways, not even a path, they're having to pull those wagons over mountains, and it was quite a feat, quite something. But when the Indians attacked, what did they do? They circled the wagons. And so we have that. That's a kind of saying an idiom in the U.S., just a way of expressing that it's time to circle the wagons, meaning it's time to come together and work together on this. We find safety in the group. We take refuge. So that's what they were taking. They were taking refuge in the circle. And they were depending on, that circle to protect them. No matter what side the bad guys came from, or the whatever guys they were, the guys who were trying to kill them. They were protected to some degree. And so the very thing that challenges us is the very thing also, and I think this is always true, the very thing that we're uncomfortable with is the very thing that is needed to give us a little push to, okay, let me come back to my breath. I don't know exactly what's going on here. I'm not sure who to believe. She just said that and he said that. But I've read this and I've heard that. I think I just need to sit back and be with myself, be with myself. And it's, for me, it's been a path of learning to trust. It's been a path of learning to trust my voice and what comes up. But actually, I think maybe it was because of where I was born and the times, I don't know, but I became, again, in the 70s, while still living in Germany, I had my first moments of taking refuge in myself and aware of that. And just breathing, and it was like there was a storm going on, an emotional storm around me. And I knew there was something I needed to do. And I was not being supported to do that by anyone, but I knew that I had to do it. And I trusted this little quiet place inside of me. And I just took refuge there. And it somehow, I found the courage was there. Because what is courage? The root word of courage is heart. So my heart, I listened to my heart. That's courage. And I did what I had to do, even though it was very difficult and a lot of people were hurt by what I did, but I knew I had to do it. And all these years later, I've recognized always I had to do it. I wish it hadn't had to be that way, but it was that way. And I had to take that action. So maybe you've encountered something like that. So you learn to listen to yourself, to that inner voice, that inner feeling. You take refuge in this. Ty uses the word the island of self. So it was on that night in Heidelberg, sitting in my living room, that I discovered that island for the first time, and I took refuge there. Yeah. So I hope that's helpful. It's a process. It is a process, but little by little. And for some of us, quicker and quicker and quicker, it just happens. Yeah. Thank you for the question. Yeah, Carrie. Yeah.
We have a few questions online.
Oh, okay. I can see them. So I'm reading, and so you can read it up there. How do we heal? I keep finding myself falling back into the same patterns despite awareness of them as they occur and trying to give myself compassion. I think that's a little frowny face, a little frowny mouth. So actually, that reminds me that our teacher said, and I have found this to be true, is we smile when we're happy. But very often our smile is the source of our happiness. And I can find myself on many given moments, many mornings, right there in Hanoi where I live, waking up, I can find myself right into a pattern, especially if I don't get out of bed immediately when I wake up. If I lie there, sometimes just sort of stretching, when really the best place for me to stretch is on my yoga mat, which is right there by my bed. But if I stay in bed and feel kind of sleepy, and then I can become aware that, oh, where have my thoughts gone? I'm in the past somewhere having a regret or some pattern. And it's always around, for me, it's around my children who are old enough to be your fathers and mothers. But they're my children. They'll always be my children, just as you'll always be your parents' children, no matter how old you are. And so I have to get up and get moving. And my mother she gave me some advice a long time ago. She said, when you find yourself not feeling happy, for one thing, she said, do not drag around the house in your pajamas. Don't do that. Always get up and get dressed. Turn around and make your bed. So just a little routine. Don't leave your room in a mess, and don't walk around the house in a mess. You know, you take care of yourself. And when you're doing that, those are small. She was not living the complex life that we live. And so she had a lot of really very concrete practices, and they worked. And she passed a lot of them on to me. And that was one. Always get dressed. And then if you find yourself feeling lonely, she lived 4 miles from town, agricultural community. Town had maybe 700 people in it. She said she would go to the grocery store, go someplace where she was around other people, because she was living alone after father died. Or she knew I was living alone, and she would tell me these things that she had always done. In other words, she found that when she connected, so that's one way to answer this question, when she had so what do we mean, when we say connect with another one? Well, sometimes we know we're doing it when we're, just looking at each other. But sometimes we can bring that connection about. Now, in Hanoi, what I do is if I'm feeling a little, and maybe it's just physically tired too, but then that also, when I'm physically tired, that affects my emotional, mental being as well. So I will go just put a little bit of money in my pocket and go down my alley. And until 11:30 every morning, there are probably about at least 30 to 40 vendors, just people who live in the neighborhood, who this one sells eggs, this one sells tomatoes, this one has fruit. And then I make connection. I don't even have to have the language, which I don't. I've only lived in Vietnam 19 years, so I haven't. I have to be there a few more years before I learn Vietnamese language. And, but I do have enough to at least say good morning and how much is that, and it's good and whatever, to make a little. But really, I've learned all I really have to do is smile and make some, and then sometimes, I do know this word. So for the Vietnamese in the group, and I say it like this. Wow. And it means expensive. And that just makes everybody laugh, So then I have a good time in the market. So simple. Years ago, when I was in the US, I did the same thing. When I was feeling a little down, I'd go to the supermarket. Yeah. Spend a little time listening to the person at the checkout counter. So how do I heal? Those are some ways I heal. By watering seeds of joy in me. Sure, wounds are still there. Some patterns are there. It takes a while. It's a process. It takes a while. And mindfulness is the key. Coming back to the moment. Coming back to the moment, practicing when there isn't an issue. When you're doing your dishes, When you're washing your face, when you're brushing your teeth, be present for your teeth. When you're squeezing the toothpaste onto the brush, you're there, you see it. You know that's what you're doing. Keep it simple. That everybody brushes their teeth. Everybody washes their face. When you go to the toilet, I heard our Zen master give virtually a whole Dharma talk on the joy of going to the toilet, you know, of being present for that function, for that miracle, for your body and what is happening. Yeah. So, so if we practice those things, then when the storm comes, or when someone says something that touches something in us, we know what to do. We don't bark back. We take a breath, and we might even smile, and it might even feel fakey, but we keep doing it, and then it feels up, because then they smile, or whoever around us sees us smile, and then that really waters my seed of happiness, because, oh, they smiled because they saw my fake smile. They didn't realize that actually I'm in agony right now. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like that. So it's little by little. So it's self-awareness. So I hope I've said I'm trying to give myself compassion. Well, you can stop trying and just do it. You learn ways to do it. And so where does compassion come from? But from understanding. And how do we access that understanding? By slowing down, stopping, being with ourselves, listening deeply to others, but also to ourselves, listening to the words I use when I talk to myself. Am I using loving words, or am I criticizing myself? So learning compassion for myself and then for others. Yeah, it's totally possible. So I hope that's helpful for that person who asked that question, and for all of you to hear the answer, the question and the answer. So let me read another one. I did not quite understand the energy of mother and father part. Can you explain more? Yeah. And I am speaking from my personal experience. I talked about this just very recently with someone. So it's fresh in my mind. So I don't want to take the whole morning to talk, to tell the story. So I'm trying to know how to be concise. So my mother and father, so I grew up with a mother and father who did not have a happy marriage at all. They were married until he passed away. They had been married like 60 years, 55 years, I forget right now. I certainly knew, but I don't remember right this minute, but that forever. And I think my mother was 19. So, you know, my parents were born in 1904 and 1906, to give you the where they were. So life was difficult. They were farmers. And my father grew up in a family the father was extremely abusive, alcoholic. And my father actually had ran away from home when he was 14. So when would that have been? 1928. I never knew much about that. He didn't talk about it, but he was gone for 2 years. And when he came back, he had a tattoo. This was before people got tattoos. And he had a tattoo right here on his inner forearm of a woman's head. That kind of image that artists use sometimes. It was like a profile of this woman. I never saw my father wearing a short sleeve shirt. He was quite ashamed of that, because people didn't get tattoos. somehow. So who knows how in the world a young teenager would have made it in those years in Florida. Yeah. So, so my father really was shut down. He didn't drink. His brother, his only brother, did drink with the father, and his only brother ended up killing himself, shooting himself in the head. And so my father was, no alcohol came into our house. And, but my father emotionally was just really a very, very, very quiet man who didn't talk about himself or anything. Really, I just almost never heard my father say anything. Certainly not to me, because of course I'm the baby and I belong to mother. I brought her the joy, and they didn't have a good relationship. So I never had a father really. He was in the house, but you belong to mother. My siblings even told me that when both were dead. Oh, everyone always knew you belonged to mama. So I didn't belong to daddy. And so I grew up wanting to belong so badly. I wanted to belong to a man. I was always heterosexual. So I was, not that I knew that word, but it was only later that I realized that I was always looking for father. And that happens very often to people because there are many reasons that fathers are not available or mothers are not available. And then we go through life trying to find them. We don't know we're doing that, but we know it when we meet the person who has that energy that's just like theirs. We don't know that. We're not conscious of that. But when my first husband, my children's father, in essence, I married my father. Both of them had the attitude of, just leave me alone. You take care of everything. And, I don't care how much money you spend or don't spend. It's not about money or control of finances or anything. Just let me do my thing. For my father, let me just go out, and I love to farm. I love the farm. I love to smell the soil. I like to have my food, very basic life. But I don't want to hear anything, and I don't want to talk about anything. So, of course, my mother, who actually come from a family that was more educated and she was a bit more out there, loved to travel and so on. Father saying, why would anybody want to go anywhere? Everything's right here. And in a sense, he was right. But my mother, she had the curiosity. So I am my mother's daughter for sure. I am her continuation. She's very happy with me. She loves being in Singapore. Yeah. So I married my father the first time. And so then what did I do? Very unhappy because I couldn't get his attention. He was quiet. There was no abuse really, certainly not physical. He just was not present. He wasn't present for the children and he wasn't present for me. And I didn't know enough to think, well, that's not okay, because after all, he had a very important job, He was a medical doctor. He was saving lives. I was just a mom with no education. That was my feeling at the time. So I never questioned. So I just kept the children quiet while he studied, while he listened to audio digest of the latest whatever about internal medicine. Or he went to the golf course. Well, he needed his relaxation, Or when he watched sports on television and wanted the children to be quiet. Well, he needed that time, So my life was like that. And so that was part of the reason that we didn't stay together. But I had found the energy of my father, and I learned some from that. But primarily after all these years of reflection, I would still say that the primary thing that happened in that marriage was I got my 3 children. The second marriage, I found it all. I loved this man. I knew it. The day I met him, I called my best friend the next day and said, I have met the man I want to marry. He had the energy of my mother and father, but primarily of my mother. Very fiery. Yeah. So, yeah, so we need, we need that. We need to encounter that. So, I mean, probably quite a few of you have had experiences where you've met someone and you feel an immediate attraction. You might even say, I fell in love. Oh my God, I fell in love. You might even say that and call it that. But it's that you've met the energy. Or you've met someone that immediately you don't like. I mentioned that earlier. And that could be the energy of, I think I used Aunt Sue. I didn't have an Aunt Sue, but I did have aunts I had one in particular who was not kind to me. And when I encountered her kind of energy, I immediately felt criticized and didn't feel comfortable and didn't even know why exactly. Yeah, I don't even know this person. So why do I have this feeling? But it's also true when we fall in love and we don't know that person, but yet we feel this strong attraction. What are you attracted to, do you think? Because you don't know them. Not really, you just met them. You don't know a thing about them, really. Now, they might tell you, well, I work at this and, I'm this age and I went to school here, whatever. But that's not how you know a person. But instinctively, intuitively, you know them because you recognize the energy. And that's a good thing because you need that so that you can rework that relationship. Now you're a grown-up adult and you have the power or the potential power to change this, to bring about a real healing and transformation. So I hope I've answered that question. I hope that person and all of you understand energy a little bit better. Yeah, we've gone over time. We have time. Okay. So have to depend on people. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you, dear Sister Trish. And thank you to those who asked the questions. That's all very much part of the honor as well. So let us conclude this segment by again coming back to our breath, joining one sound of the bell.